All right, guys. In the first video, we talked about the halo and how to see the five vertical tubes, the hard deck, apex, center line, flat space. We're going to take it a step further now. We're going to put a defense in and talk about how we look at those guys in each of those with the frames of reference provided by the halo. So we'll start with the one high safety in this look. We have Rex, middle of the field, a 2x2 formation. They have a one high safety, what looks like a cover three corner over there, a hard corner to the left, and then an even front with the strong safety playing to the outside, the sandbacker, Mike, and Will. Okay, so we got like a 4-4 one high look right now. The first thing, now we want to apply the halo. So the hard deck comes in at 7 yards. And what we see now is that one corner off to the right is above the hard deck. This corner in this cushion tube is below the hard deck. Now with the one high look, now we're going to build in our apex next. And then our center line. Okay, so now how we evaluate this with a defense. There's two things we're kind of looking at here when we're game planning, and we want to see how we're going to attack and if a defense lines up against this. The intent of the defense, they want to keep like a +1 player advantage in 4 components of the field. In left side pass space, they want to be +1. Right now it looks like 2-on-2, but we'll talk about this guy here in a moment. They want to keep a +1 in the left side of the run box, +1 in the right side of the run box, and a +1 to the right side of route space. So evaluating that situation, well, let's get the 5 vertical tubes up. The crossover tube, collision tubes, and our cushion tubes out there. All right, so we're going to start here on the right side of the run box. The defense is +1 because they have 4 defenders over 3 linemen. So they are +1 right here. We don't count the center, anyone on the center line. If there was a tackle over the center and he could block him, then we would count the center. But if the tackle is shaded off of the center and can get to that gap, then the center's not in the count. In this case, it is 4 over 3, so they're +1. Left side of the run box, they're also +1 as they have 3 defenders over 2 linemen not on the center line in the left side of the run box. They also want to make sure that they have gap integrity taken care of. So they have the outside gap taken care of, the C gap, the B gap, the A gap, backside A, backside B, backside C. Now they also want to be +1 to route space, and they are +1 right now. They have 2 defenders over 2 immediate outside threats here. Now their safety is on the center line, so at this point he can be counted to the left side of route space or to the right side of route space. When they're on the center line, we're going to have to use some kind of scheme to see which way we can get him to flow. And in this case, we'd probably use a flow scheme where if we wanted to neutralize route space to the left, take away their +1 advantage, if the quarterback in his drop and he was focused on this way over here, he might get this guy, the safety, to drop that way, flow that way, and that would be called flow scheme to neutralize the space in the right, which would be, the left. It would be neutral at +0 here. But at this point, if he drops off to this side, they got a +1. And he's on the center line. If he drops off to this side, they got a +1 to route space to the right. So right now they have +1 to each side. That's called man advantage. All right, we're going to try to attack neutral spaces. We're going to try to scheme up. We're going to try to identify spaces where they're neutral, +0, or scheme it up, which is something we'll get into later. But the other part we're looking at pre-snap and in the game planning form of this is how do we attack initially attack a defense when they line up against us like this? So we look at man advantage and then bubbles of space that are made available to us. So in any given alignment, there are 15 areas on the field that we can attack, and there are 11 defenders. So that the math tells you that there are 4 spaces of available open space that's uncovered to attack. Now, no matter how you line up, we're going to have 15 areas to attack. It starts in the box. We have 7 gaps here because our tight end. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And they have all those gaps taken care of. We have the 5 vertical tubes. Those are 5 other areas. So the 7 gaps, the 5 vertical tubes, that's 12 spaces. And then we have 1 space to attack in the flat here with 1 immediate threat to the outside. We have 2 immediate threats to the outside on the left, so that gives us 2 spaces in the flats. So that's 15 total. With 11 defenders, that leaves 4 areas for bubbles. So we're going to identify what part of the field do those bubbles belong in. And we have a bubble above the hard deck and the cushion tube with this hard corner here. We have a bubble available in the collision tube above the hard deck. You can see the safety is in the crossover tube, so that's unavailable. We have this corner in the collision tube to the right, that's unavailable. We have another bubble in the cushion tube to the right and a bubble in the flat. So in game planning, we want to find out where can we neutralize man advantage and how can we attack these bubbles of space. And our initial game plan would be to attack these areas and see how the defense adjusts to cover them and then prepare a counter attack to all that. So the bubbles can move when the defense moves. If we had a little different alignment here, so let's say if we're in a cover 3, if we got a cover 3 look. So if this guy is, say, up here and this corner starts, let's put them both up here. Cover 3 will go about 7-8 yards. And on the inside, it's going to change the bubbles now. Now that this corner is above the hard deck, now we have a bubble available out here. Okay. If the corner was below the hard deck and say the safety was kind of giving more attention to this side, now he's no longer on the center line. Okay. So now we're actually at a neutral advantage off to the left here. The thing about bubbles is if they have an inside guy right here and they want to move him out into flat space, if they move him out into flat space, now they've just uncapped an outside gap. And now we have a bubble inside the run box. So capping flat space or capping route space uncaps run space. Okay. If they wanted to, let's say, give us a 2-high look here. So if we had a safety here, a strong safety up top, let's just go with a cover 2 look. A low corner, we'd probably get the Sam on the outside, Mike on the inside, and then Will might be right here on the apex or so. Okay, so how does that change our bubbles now? So we got a 2-high look, a cover 2 look. We still have a bubble here. Now this bubble is going to move to the inside. And we don't necessarily have a 4th available bubble that we can see at this point. And a lot of that has to do with this guy right here because he's on the apex. Okay, now with him on the apex, he kind of counts in route space and he also counts in box space because it's hard for us to tell what his intent is at that point. So we're going to have to enact like a fake scheme to try to pull him in. So if we had a little flash to the running back here, if we kind of flash faked him right there and we got this Willie to bite up in there, that's called a fake scheme. And that kind of uncaps route space and gives us another bubble. Um, if we wanted to uncap the run space, if we drop back in a draw, that kind of be another form of flow scheme. And he maybe comes out, and then we can head up in there with an insert draw. So when there are defenders that are on, remember when the safety was on the center line, how that impacted us to the left and to the right. And if these linebackers are on the apex, we kind of have to scheme them to find that bubble of space. But if he's in here, we have a bubble here. If he's out here over this defender, and they're showing a lot of respect to our pass game, now we got a bubble in here, and they're not going to want to leave a gap undone. If he's sitting on the apex, we're going to have to scheme that open and find out where that bubble is with some flow scheme or some fake scheme. But that's how the bubbles work. All right, now let's take a different formation here. We're on the left hash with a rip. We're in a 3-by-1. So we'll start by looking at a 2-high defense. Free over the center, strong up high. There we go. We're 2-high with our corners. Possibly a cover 2 look. Either way, we're 2-high. So now we're going to go with an odd front just to give us a different kind of view of how the space works. So we got a nose, 2 tackles, Mike and Sam to the strength, Buck and Will to the weak. All right, so now we're going to put in the halo. So the hard deck comes in at 7 yards. Next, we bring in the apex from Emil to R and Emil to X and the center line. 5 vertical tubes. Our crossover tube is now on the left side to the hash. And then we have our cushion, crossover, collision, and cushion. All right, so now looking at this from a man advantage perspective. Again, remember, the defense wants to be +1 in 4 components. To the left side of route space, left side of the run box, right side of the run box, and right side of route space. We're looking to find areas where they don't have the advantage and attack those areas. Also, we're going to look at where those bubbles are available. So let's start with determining man advantage here. To the right side of the run box, they have a +1. They have 1, 2, 3, 4 defenders over 3 blockers not on the center line. Now, there's some nuance here with this nose. He's shaded, so he has an open access to that gap before the center could necessarily get there. So that's why when he was off over here, the center's not included in man advantage, and the nose counts there. Now, if the nose was head up and we know that the center can get to him, then he neutralizes him, and we'd be +0 here. We'd be looking at ways to maybe attack this area. But let's shade him, and they got a +1 there. To the left side of the run box, they also have a +1 with 3 defenders over 2 non-center line blockers. And then to the left side of route space, they got a +1 because we got 1 immediate threat to the left side route space. They got him covered here, and they have a safety here to get him north of the hard deck. To the right side of the space, we're neutral because we have 2 immediate threats to route space to the right. They have 2 defenders over that. And that's it. So now we're going to start to look at where those bubbles come in. And we see we got a bubble in the left cushion tube, right collision tube, right cushion tube, and in the near flat on the right side. So there's our 4 bubbles. So again, from a game plan perspective, initially in the outside of the game, we want to attack the alignment of the defense and the bubbles of space they give us. And we want to attack neutral advantage. So in a setup like this, attacking to the field in the right space. It looks good. We got 3 bubbles over there. We're neutral over there. We're going to find ways to get into that space. Whether we're going to go with a scat concept and get that Z up into that bubble. I mean, God, there's a million things we can do. We can run a smash concept to get up in here and high-low that corner. We'll get into that kind of stuff later in, but what I want out of this video is for you guys to understand how to look at the field, how to identify the bubbles of space. Now, we said before when to move a defender out into route space steals a bubble from the run box, okay, and gives us an unmanned gap to attack in run space. Defense's first priority is going to be to make sure they have all the run space covered. Typically, if they don't, we're going to attack it. But they have every gap accounted for here in this +1 on each side of the box. If they went with a 1 high look, like a cover 1 here, and that safety kind of split himself into the field, and maybe we got a cover 1, so we're man elsewhere. So if the safety's manning up here, the corner is manning up here, probably 5 yards away. This corner is man, and Sam is probably manning that tight end. Where do our bubbles of space exist now? In a cover 1. So now all the bubbles are above the hard deck. I'm not going to get too deep into coverages right now. We're gonna do that at a later time. But what you can see is different alignments give different areas and bubbles, and we are going to attack those bubbles and see how these guys react to it. And we're going to prepare a counteraction.